Hey y'all! Today I'm spinning the fourth and hopefully final yarn for a wall hanging project I've been working on. I made spinning vlogs for the other 3 yarns as well, so if you like this video, you'll probably enjoy those too, so be sure to check them out next. I'll have them linked in the description. For this yarn, I'm spinning a luxurious Batt from Cedar Grove Ranch. I highly recommend following them on Instagram or checking out their Etsy. They raise some of their own fiber animals, which I love. And my Batt even came with a picture of one of the Angora goats some of the fiber came from. This Batt is a blend of mohair, wool, silk viscose nips, bamboo, flax, and sparkle. And in case you're unfamiliar with this type of fiber prep, it's made by layering fibers onto a drum carder. Fiber prep is important to keep in mind for the type of yarn you want. I really like spinning batts with variation like this for a more textured, uneven yarn. However, if my goal was a smooth, consistent yarn, then that would be harder to achieve and more frustrating with this type of fiber prep. To get this Batt ready to spin, I'm dividing it into roughly even sections and rolling them up into neat little balls. I ended up with 6 balls and decided to do 3 balls per bobbin so they were roughly the same amount because I wasn't sure if I was going to ply them together or just ply them with thread. Now let's get started at the wheel. I'm applying a bit of oil and then threading my leader yarn on my bobbin through the orifice hole. Then it's time to attach the fiber to the leader yarn. I hold the loop at the end of the leader and then add twist. Then I thread a bit of the fiber through the loop and back onto itself and let the twist travel into the fiber. For my singles, I always spin my wheel clockwise. And then sometimes at the beginning, I gotta give the yarn a little help to wind onto the bobbin because the yarn can be a little bit slippery. I'm doing a woolen style draft for this one, where I pull the fiber away from the wheel with my backhand and control the twist by pinching with my front hand. And as always, I like to show y'all how I join the fiber if I'm adding a new section or the yarn breaks. Basically, all I do is mash the 2 fluffy ends together and then add twist. It's really simple. This was a really intimidating thing for me when I first started spinning, but you'll get the hang of it. And of course, you've got to give it a little tug to make sure the join is secure. This fiber was a dream to spin, and my wheel was giving me no problems this time. In my last video, my wheel was giving me all kinds of trouble, like wobbling and the drive band popping off. A leg had fallen off my wheel when I was getting started, and it seems to have jolted the wheel in a way that unaligned the mother of all from the spinning wheel. I actually spun this yarn back in April, but it has taken me a while to get around to editing. Life feels so overwhelming, and a part of me feels weird about making videos when the world sort of feels like it's falling apart and people are being snatched off the street. Where I come from, it's common for most people to avoid talking about politics, so when people do talk about it, things start getting uncomfortable. I don't usually talk about that kind of stuff in my videos, but I have some thoughts that I have to get out. Because when we don't have conversations about this stuff, we're forfeiting the opportunity to learn something new and gain insight. And who does it benefit in the end to keep us ignorant of these things? To keep us from educating ourselves? The less you know, the less likely you are to make decisions that are in your own best interest, and more likely to fall for propaganda. But let's pause this conversation for a minute because it's time to ply. I ended up with nearly 2 full bobbins of singles and decided to ply each one individually with silver metallic thread instead of plying the singles together. But back to what I was talking about. We're at a crazy point right now where there is a disturbing amount of people who believe in weather manipulating technology capable of causing massive floods and not believe the actual science of climate change. Because to some people, it is a hoax. That's wild. I have a degree in biology and a minor in biotech, so you could say I know a thing or two about science. I even wrote a research paper in college on climate change and deforestation, and the science speaks for itself. that we are experiencing a human-induced climate change, and only human intervention can slow down the devastating effects. And that is not a priority of our current leaders, which is like sort of terrifying. And let's not forget the attack on reproductive rights. I had a hysterectomy 3 years ago for medical reasons, and leading up to my surgery, it crossed my mind that if anything like The Handmaid's Tale ever happened, I wouldn't be forced to be pregnant. That was a somewhat wild and outlandish thought at the time, in July of 2022, but then again, Roe v. Wade was overturned the month prior. Now here we are in 2025, and I'm so relieved that I do not have a uterus, but I am so stressed for those that do because of the lack of access to reproductive care for so many people. There are so many other devastating things that are currently happening, like people losing health care, people being detained in inhumane conditions without due process, and the dismantling of the Constitution, but I can't fit it all in this video. I just want you to remember that willful ignorance may be bliss for you, but someone else is suffering the consequences of that ignorance, and eventually those consequences might even catch up to you. Now, after those uplifting thoughts, let's get back to the yarn. We're entering the final stretch by winding it off the wheel and onto the Niddy Noddy. This makes the yarn into a big loop that you twist into a hank, and it makes it easy to count the yardage. I like to secure my hank in 4 places while it's still on the Niddy Noddy using figure 8 ties, which is where you split the yarn in half and weave the tie through the middle to make a figure 8. Here's a quick look before the yarn gets its bath to set the twist. I'll show you more clips of the finished yarn after that. I'm washing this with hot water that is still touchable, and of course I'm going to use my go-to soap, which is the Tufts Bar in Chai Spice. After pressing the yarn in the water so it's fully saturated, I let it soak for like 15 minutes. And I didn't end up doing a rinse for this one. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, and there's not much logic to it. So I pressed out as much water as I could. Remember, press it out, don't wring it out. Then I rolled the yarn up in a towel and pressed it out pretty good. And then I gave the yarn a couple big tugs to help straighten out the strands. Finally, I hung it up on a chair to dry and put a towel under it to catch the drips. Here are some close-ups of the finished yarn. I love the way this yarn turned out with all the color variation and the silver thread. It's also very soft. And like I said in the beginning of this video, I spun this yarn to pair with some other yarn that I had spun for a wall hanging of some sort. This is all of the yarn for the project, but I don't feel like the green and magenta yarn matches the vibe of the others, so I don't think I'll end up using it for this project. I'm leaning towards some kind of freeform crochet, but I'm kind of intimidated because I haven't done that before. But be sure to subscribe to see what I end up making with these hand spun yarns. And if you enjoyed this video, you'll probably like my other yarn spinning videos, so I'll put a link to that playlist in the description and on this outro screen. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon in the next video. Bye!